all work together. Thank you.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will say from the beginning that I'll be splitting my time with the member from Honoré Mercier. I'm very proud to stand here today to add my voice to those supporting the ratification of the Paris Agreement. Madam Speaker, we know that our climate is changing. We also know the dramatic changes of our climate have disproportionately affected those most vulnerable in the world, including, most notably, children. Canada has a responsibility to be a leader when it comes to tackling this very real and pressing issue. In ratifying this agreement, Canada has made a public commitment to set and achieve the climate target the world needs. Our government knows that transitioning to a sustainable, low-carbon economy is the only way we can achieve greater economic prosperity in a responsible way. The ratification of this agreement is a historic step to ensuring we leave the world cleaner and more prosperous for our children and generations to come. I am very proud of the collaborative approach that our government has taken as we negotiated this agreement and work that has been done since. At every step of the way, we have engaged with partners at the provincial and territorial level, Indigenous groups, with industry and environmental groups. This kind of inclusive decision-making is the only way to achieve meaningful results that will work for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. I know that we will continue in that spirit as we move forward in meeting these obligations. Madam Speaker, we go into this agreement with eyes wide open. Signing and ratifying is the easy part. Then the real work begins. Setting targets is important, but those targets mean very little if there is no plan to achieve them. I specifically want to thank and commend my colleague, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, for her hard work and leadership on this file. Our team has been clear that reaching these targets and helping Canada transition to a low-carbon economy will require a whole-of-government approach. From the construction of green infrastructure to responsible management of our natural resources, to ensuring that we have a workforce ready to thrive in a new global marketplace, we need all voices at the table working together to ensure that we are successful. Earlier today, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister stood in this House and announced the implementation of a national price on pollution. This is critically important to meeting the Paris Agreement targets. Our provincial and territorial governments recognize this. In fact, in the absence of past federal leadership, some have already moved ahead. 85% of Canadians now live in a province that has put a price on carbon pollution. While encouraging and impressive, this piecemeal effort is not enough. For Canada to be successful in reducing our emissions overall, we need coordination, support, and leadership at the federal level. As the Prime Minister announced earlier, the government proposes that in provinces and territories with a direct price on carbon pollution, the price will start at a minimum of $10 per tonne in 2018, rising each year by $10 to $50 per tonne in 2022. Provinces and territories with cap-and-trade system will also need a 2030 emissions reduction target equal to or greater than Canada's 30% reduction target. By doing so in a responsible way and increasing the price on pollution over the next 5 years, territorial and provincial governments will have the time they need to design a system of carbon pollution pricing that works best for them. The federal government will work in partnership with them on implementation, and I have every confidence in our collective success. Speaking of partnership, Madam Speaker, I would be remiss if I did not mention the great work being done at a local level. Recognizing the need for action, the region of Durham, which includes my riding of Whitby, developed the Community Climate Change Local Action Plan in 2012. This comprehensive strategy lays out detailed actions that can be undertaken across the region to address climate change. It also established an advisory board that is responsible for positioning Durham Region as a leader addressing climate change issues by developing a strategy which includes mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency. It is the kind of proactive leadership we need to embrace and support at all levels if we are going to make progress. The action taken today will augment the good work being done by communities across Canada to strengthen our response to climate change. While important, putting a price on carbon is just one of several important steps our government is taking to reduce our emissions. Earlier this year, I was honored to accompany the Prime Minister on a state visit to Washington. Out of that visit came a comprehensive agreement to work closely together to address climate change. By coordinating with our closest ally and trading partner on issues like reducing methane emissions, advancing climate action at the global level, and cooperation on clean energy technology, we multiply and strengthen our own efforts. Madam Speaker, I'd like to talk briefly about some of our steps our government has already taken to reach the targets in the Paris Agreement. Specifically, in Budget 2016, we made significant investments that will help us transition to a low-carbon economy. This includes $20 billion to establish the Low Carbon Economy Fund, which will support provincial and territorial actions that materially reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Additionally, we recognize the vital role that development of clean technology will play in combating climate change. Canada can and must be a world leader in developing cutting-edge technologies that will power the planet in decades to come. Accordingly, the budget provides more than $1 billion over the next 4 years to support the development of clean energy technology. Earlier this year, I hosted a climate change town hall in my riding of Whitby. From that meeting, it was clear that the constituents in my riding believe the government's priority should be on preparing Canada to lead the clean technology revolution. Budget 2016, along with our ambitious innovation agenda, developed in partnership with educational and research institutions and industry, makes the investment to get us there. Additionally, we are making massive investments to help communities prepare for, mitigate, and reduce the impact of climate change. Budget 2016 proposes to invest over $5 billion over the next 5 years in practical infrastructure that protects communities and supports Canada's ongoing transition to a clean growth economy. The budget also contains more than $3.4 billion over 3 years to upgrade and improve public transit systems across Canada. Better public transit means less cars on the road producing emissions. As the MP for a riding where many of my constituents travel to Toronto by car every day, I am thrilled with these investments to reduce emissions while improving my constituents' quality of life. Madam Speaker, my 12-year-old daughter, Candace, is an Earth Rangers ambassador. A couple of years ago, she aggressively raised funds for the endangered Oregon spotted frog. Our young people know the devastation of climate change and are working to combat it. I am proud that Budget 16 provided up to $197 million over 5 years to restore ocean and freshwater science monitoring and research activities. This will ensure that Canada's oceans, coasts, waterways, and fisheries are healthy, sustainable, and profitable for generations to come. Canadians right across the country are calling for their governments to act urgently on climate change. The ratification of the Paris Agreement is just one step, but an important one. It is Canada's public commitment to doing its part. There is much work to come and challenges that will need to be addressed, but I urge everyone in this chamber to join me in supporting the ratification. I truly believe that it is something future generations will look back on and be proud of. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for her speech. She's obviously very committed to finally taking action on climate change. The government today announced that they would put a price on carbon, but we're getting feedback, Madam Speaker, from a number of people who worked on these issues for quite some time. Clean Energy Canada, who are experts on pursuing avenues for cleaner power sources, and the Suzuki Foundation. Clean Energy Canada has said, on its own, carbon price scheduled today won't get the job done. It's only one piece of the puzzle. Federal and provincial governments will need to pair carbon pricing with smart regs and a transition to clean power across the economy to get Canada on track to hit a national target. Suzuki Foundation said the federal government will need to rely on additional policies to reduce emissions to meet the 2030 targets, given the modest carbon price compared to existing provincial policies. These additional emission reduction approaches should include quicker phase out of coal-fired electricity, a national energy public transportation infrastructure, and take away the subsidies to fossil fuel industry. Could the member say the government is saying they've done enough and now they can ratify? Does she agree, or does she agree with these people that more needs to be done?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I was very clear in my speech that the announcement today was one step in which we took to reduce our carbon emissions in this country. As I mentioned in my speech, and I'm pretty sure was clear, the government has also included in Budget 2016, long before today, $2 billion to establish a low carbon economy fund, $1 billion over the next 4 years to support and develop a clean energy technology, $5 billion over the next 5 years in practical infrastructure that supports and protects communities, $3.4 billion over the next 3 years to upgrade and improve public transit. Madam Speaker, we know that this is not the only solution, that we need to have a whole of government collaborative approach when we're dealing with climate change, and we are committed to doing so both on the ground with research and with communities and our provincial partners. Thank you.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my friend from across the way for her speech. And as the Member of Parliament for Whitby, she has a lot of people that live in urban settings and probably won't see a big cost associated with this tax grab that's going to come out with this $50 a ton carbon tax, compared to what rural Canadians are going to face, northern communities are going to have to deal with, and how it's going to impact on agriculture. The one way that they are going to see it, especially those that are living on fixed incomes and low income, is in the price of food. We know that $50 a ton carbon tax will increase the price of fuel by 11.5 cents per litre. That translates into higher production costs, higher transportation costs of getting products to market, of growing those products, and it will actually disadvantage locally produced foods over imported foods, since trucks coming in from the U.S. will bring it in at a cheaper rate on cheap U.S. fuel compared to what our truckers are going to pay here in Canada. I'd like to ask my colleague from Whitby if she could explain to me how she will explain to her own constituents why they're going to be paying so much for locally grown produce.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. I'd like to say that Whitby is comprised of both rural and an urban setting, and most of my constituents do travel to Toronto for work, so they do know how much the price of fuel affects their daily living. But, Madam Speaker, what is the alternative? Doing nothing? When we know that climate change affects agricultural industries, which will ultimately cause an increase in our food, increase in the amount of insurance that members in Whitby or my constituents in Whitby pay, increases in fuel charges that will come from devastating impacts of climate change on our economy. Madam Speaker, we cannot sit back and continue to do nothing as we've done for the past 10 years. We really need to step up our game, and we have done so in our budget. We have done so with this announcement today. We are working in partnership with our communities, our provinces and territories, and we have a leadership at the government level, which was announced today by our Prime Minister, that allows us to move forward in a very progressive way to be able to tackle climate change across our country. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions, resuming debate.